Welcome to LeaderIQ, where we share the stories of leaders in brand and retail, so you can learn what led them to find success in their careers, while giving you an intimate look at how they made foundational decisions along the way. This show is hosted by Guru Hariharan, who's the founder and CEO of CommerceIQ. Guru spent most of his career working as a leader at companies like Amazon and eBay, before becoming an entrepreneur himself. This podcast is brought to you by CommerceIQ, a company which Guru started in 2019. It has become the e-commerce operating system for brands like Logitech, Johnson & Johnson, Kellogg's, Mars, Duracell, and many more. If you're interested, check out commerceiq.ai to learn more. With that, let's get to the show. Today's guest is Jim Sustar, President and Co-Founder of Trademark Global. Jim and his brother started out home selling on eBay after college, before deciding to turn it into a business. In the early 2000s, Trademark accurately predicted that a turning point had arrived for e-commerce business and changed their mission from acting as an online seller to supplying and distributing products for mass market retailers. Today, Trademark Global is a consumer brand manufacturer that provides an endless aisle solution for retailers like Amazon, Wayfair, and Walmart. Without further ado, here is Jim Sustar and your host, Guru Hariharan.
Jim, it's first of all fantastic to have you on the podcast. It's been wonderful to know you as a person, and also had a chance to meet you for the first time. You participated in our little NASDAQ thing and was wonderful to hang out with you. I've always, as I mentioned to you in my email, I have a very special place for founders and for people who've started operations and stuff like that. And so it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for making time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Guru. And it was an honor to be included with your celebration earlier this year. And it was great to meet you in person.
Very cool. So Jim, maybe just start with sort of your early life. What was it growing up? What was it like growing up with your brother? Did you, and that was also an interesting story. Would love to actually unravel your early life and how that shaped your career afterwards.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I've lived in Cleveland, Ohio, the Cleveland, Ohio area all of my life, which, no one calls the internet capital of the world. It's not exactly Silicon Valley. So, as Cleveland was a very blue collar, hardworking town back in the day. And it's pretty much how my brothers and I were raised. Not only were my parents hardworking, but they were also very entrepreneurial, where my mother and father owned their own businesses. My father and his family immigrated from Slovenia during World War II, and he grew up in a Slovenian neighborhood on the east side of Cleveland. And as you can imagine, they had to work very hard, especially with the language barrier. So my father worked in a factory for many years before he started his own business in the same industry. He created a machine shop business where I also worked in after college. His brother, my uncle, worked as a police officer many years before he started a wholesale business where he would buy closeout retail merchandise and resell it. So really entrepreneurism runs in the family, but it was a very hardworking family. But I think the entrepreneurism was key to, how my brother and I, ended up going out, on our own. My brother was actually the first one to start it. But so my uncle was key in connecting my brother and I with some of the initial products. This was why I bring my uncle up. We started to sell. So coming up with products were not really the problem for us, especially since we were embarking on, the new frontier, e-commerce. This was 1999, where the thirst for any product was there. So, interesting that we had access to wholesale products because of my uncle. But really, I think the early years, our values were formed just by hardworking and entrepreneurialism, and kind of got us on the path to where we are today.
That's pretty cool. That's I think there's something about the immigrant life, if you may. So did you get a chance, like what was that like in terms of your parents sort of, was there some immigrant aspects of your early childhood in growing up with all this?
Well, they moved to the eastern side of Cleveland where there was a Slovenian, community, which is probably very common for people to come over. He came over in World War II and he was 6 and his brother was 4. So my grandparents could not speak English, and living in that neighborhood, you never really had to. So they really didn't. So going to school for them was probably pretty tough. I just saw it at family gatherings where everybody was speaking Slovenian. I never learned how to speak it because, my uncle, my dad, and his sister, since they were young enough, they acclimated by the time they graduated high school to, pretty much, the English language. So, and my mother is not Slovenian. So we kind of did not have that hardcore immigrant feeling in our household, only probably when we visited the relatives. But I being in Cleveland in the blue collar town, and I think the fact that they were immigrants, they were working 2 jobs, and the second job became them starting their own businesses, and it's kind of what that I guess that's the part that we witnessed.
I think there's something about the hustle, right? Like I think it's kind of interesting, like the immigrant life in the States, and of course this is what we are made of as a country. And the first and second generation immigrants who sort of grow up seeing the hustle or actually going through the hustle of sort of making ends meet and stuff like that. It sort of builds a lot of that muscle of not giving up, and which is so critical in building businesses. Frankly, I went through that myself. Yeah. So it just, So that's something which I'm very curious to know.
Yeah, like my father said, he goes, I came over and I worked very hard. Your job is to go a little bit further than me. So, made sure I went to college, and my brothers all went to college. I'm telling my daughter the same thing. I'm like, you've got to get further than, just strive to keep taking the family further, and you end up being, you see these 5th and 6th and 7th generation Americans, it's, no wonder how they got there, because I just can't imagine our family down that line, but it's very exciting. It's the American way.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And so, and then you growing up in Cleveland, then how did you decide to go to Cleveland State University?
Well, earlier in my year, I was actually played in a band my teenage years, and that was one of the things I had fun doing. I was a bass player in a rock band. A lot of people don't know about me, but so I wanted to stay local and keep playing in the band. And I went to school on the side, not on the side, but I was doing both. We were actually had a pretty good band. We had originals. We almost got signed to a major label. I don't know if you know the band Blondie from way back. Their manager was our manager. So, we were taking it seriously. Of course, our parents are saying like, hey, you got to put a timeline on that, graduate college. So I ended up getting my, business marketing degree from Cleveland State. So that's how I ended up.
That's cool. So are you still continuing your passion with rock bands?
Oh, no. I know several people that still play around, and I'll stop out and hop on stage and play a song, and that scratches that itch. But no, I haven't been doing that since I joined the e-commerce. E-commerce has been all consuming.
We do need some rock stars and intersecting with e-commerce to make things more interesting, for sure.
That's funny.
Tell us about
we call our best employees rock stars. I guess I never thought about it that way.
There you go. Yeah. So maybe you're the chief rock star in both ways.
That's too funny.
Nice. That's great to hear. Tell us about your first eBay business.
Well, I got to give my brother Dan a lot of credit. He was the first to dive in 1999. He started selling on eBay, and I saw what my brother did. I started selling in 2001 on eBay. He at this point, he lived on the west side of Cleveland. I lived on the east side. We were about an hour away. And as you can imagine back then, digital cameras were just starting out. And so you had to figure out even things like how to plug your digital camera into your computer, and then hosting a picture on eBay. The concept just did, I had many all-nighters. There was no one to help you figure this out. You basically had to do all-nighters and figure this stuff out for yourself. The simplest stuff now that people take for granted were huge obstacles to get over to be able to sell, because eBay didn't do that for you. eBay was very new, and it was great. It was the new frontier. So he started selling on 99, figured it out first, was getting, with the help of my uncle, and my dad going to auctions, getting general merchandise to sell, and hit a trade show where my uncle had told him about, and all kind of, from Star Trek collector plates, from anything collectibles, because that's kind of what eBay was known for, but really anything you could sell on there. He was selling collector swords and knives, like medieval things, and that's one line that took off. But you can imagine something like swords and knives where one warehouse couldn't support, one region couldn't support that kind of sales, but eBay would bring it to nationwide. So one warehouse supplying nationwide could prosper. And so another product. So we were just trying to sell all different things. He was, and then I was getting products from the same place. He eventually got bigger than me, and I was getting products from him. So in effect, he was my supplier, and that was 99. Actually, that was 2001 when I was selling at home. And then in March 15th, 2002, I still remember the day, I joined him. I moved over to the west side of Cleveland, and I'm going, all right, I'd rather be part of something great. I knew he was an operations guru because he had, worked at Ford Motors plant. He was pretty high up in there. He was an engineer, and I really liked the sales and marketing side. And so I go wow, I just played it out in my head. I go, I'm not sure how far I'm going to get with, by myself. And he asked me to come over and work with him. And it's probably the greatest move we ever made, because I was able to concentrate on the front end while he was, taking care, providing the structure of the whole business, which I appreciated. So selling the products, how I got to really tell you, poker was the next thing that came up, because we had done poker nights with my uncle. My dad charity poker nights, and poker chips and the game of poker has always been around our family. And at that point, my uncle still had thousands and thousands of poker chips sitting in his garage. And he asked my brother Dan, said, hey, can you sell these? And he's like, give them a try. He just grabbed a bin and put them up on eBay. And wow, the demand was huge. And you got to imagine this was 2002, 3, and 4. And if you remember back then online, Party Poker was big. Poker Stars were big. There was a hockey strike in the NHL, and ESPN, especially in Canada, was broadcasting poker games. So you started to see Texas Hold'em on TV. So people wanted the real poker chips at home. And again, we didn't really have a brand or a line. We were just selling anything. But I got to believe, if I was going to say what was our first brands or what was our first lines, the swords and knives, collectibles was huge. But then poker became a brand for us. And we created poker sets. We grabbed cards. We created brands. We even signed some of the, after we got a little bigger, some of the professional poker players to endorsement deals and trying to sell with their names on it stuff. And this was a really crazy time from 2002 to 2004. So that was.
That's a great story, Jim. I think what I heard is a lot of hustle, right? It's pretty much finding opportunities, trying it out. Let's throw the dart on the wall and see if it sticks. And then if it did, you were not afraid to scale it and go think beyond. Sometimes you could you could have just maybe even stopped by just selling those, selling the early collectibles, but you sort of expanded your assortment and category, like what you would sort of do call it today, but then you did it pretty organically. So when did you kind of sort of get a sense or a confidence that you could actually turn it into a full-time job, and this was it, that I was going to do this full-time and I was going to go take it big and create jobs, as opposed to saying, well, okay, good side gig. Now I need to go, join a big company or something like that.
Well, let me go back then. 99, my brother was selling out of his house. I think in 2000, 2001, he moved out and got a place. And I was selling out of my house and, with the day job. And I saw what he did. I'm like, hey, I should get a place. This is really taking off. And that's when I decided to join him. And at that point in time, really March 15, 2002, when I moved over to him, for me, that became a job there, because he already had a little bit of structure in place. So that he really provided that for me. That would have been, it was a bigger leap for him probably than for me, because I knew it was going to become a job there selling. And we were just selling on eBay. And at that time, we had started 5stardeal.com, a website, because so early on, you just didn't you need it. You go, okay, where's the next place I'm going to sell it? Or why should I pay eBay fees? Let's get a website. Little did you know all the Google advertising you have to pay for and all this other stuff. But still, that early on, we were a retailer, and we could have gone down that path of staying at a retailer, but when you're a general merchandise retailer, 5stardeal.com doesn't say anything to the poker, doesn't say anything to a specific line. We found out years later, you just can't be a general merchandise independent site, because that, what that's called? That's called Amazon and Walmart and Target. You just can't open up. But that there was people that did it. CSN Stores created microsites, turned into Wayfair, and for every successful story, there's probably a lot of unsuccessful stories. But I think when the poker took off, we started calling it Trademark Poker. Well, we didn't really call the brand because we didn't know a lot about branding. We were 5stardeal.com 2002 and 3 selling on eBay, and you could only have so many auctions at a time. Like, I believe it was 10 auctions per seller site, and we still have www.5stardeal.com as a seller. We were grandfathered in. eBay won't let anybody have a URL as
domain name.
Yeah, you'll still find that on there. So we put ads in wholesale magazines, and people were creating seller accounts on eBay and even their own websites, and they were selling our poker products. So we started supplying eBay sellers so we could have more than 10 listings. Our listings would be everywhere. Basically, in 2003 and 4, if you went on eBay to find poker products, it was probably shipping out of our warehouse. I had friends, I went to poker games and say, hey, that's from our warehouse. And they're like, no, I bought it from ABC Company. I'm like, yeah, it came out of our warehouse. We were the only idiots with $2 million of poker chips in our warehouse. But what happened, then we started selling to the billiard stores and independents, and they were very upset that they were buying from a competing retailer called 5stardeal.com on site. They're like, well, you can't compete with us. You're going to supply us and then compete with us. The traditional people, that's a no-no. And that's when we're like, all right, let's find a new name. And we created Trademark Poker, which also became the brand. And so I think that's when we, that was our first really foray into turning this from a retail business to a wholesale business. Would we have been more successful if we went down the line as a retail business? I don't know. Like I said, for every Wayfair, there's probably 2,000 heartbreak stories. And where we were raised, our uncle was in the wholesale business. It kind of just felt right. And we continued down that path. And, Trademark Poker was it. That was, so it was our first brand. We still sold the other stuff, but that was our brand. Yeah.
And that's where the name Trademark Global came from, where you probably expanded out and made it more wider assortment.
Yeah, 2003, 4, and 5, it exploded. Like, I'll tell you back then, because we weren't even doing $1 million in 2002 and 3, and by 2004 we did $24 million. It was like it exploded. And then what happened? That led to us getting lots of connections. We were okay. So I guess you would say the eBay sellers that we supplied, we created a back end where they could log in to 5stardeal.com, and the administrative side, they could grab a listing, put the listing up for $19.99 if they want to sell it for that, where they'd see their price would be $12. They would sell it on eBay. They would log into the back end of our site, pay us $12. And then we would ship it out for them. Of course, there was shipping in there too. And we would have their name on the packing slip when it went out. That was part of the thing where they didn't want to know 5-Star Deal existed. And we created that. And so I guess that was blind drop shipping before we ever even heard of the term. So I'm not saying we invented it. I'm just saying we were doing it. And this was 2003. So along came in 2004, we were doing these trade shows, and Target came along, and Overstock.com came along, and CSN Stores, Wayfair came along, found us at the toy show and other shows that we were showing our poker products. And that's really where I really came in, and my niche was on the wholesale side. I really headed up sales to all the retail sellers. I know I carry the title as president, but really I've been president of sales since the very beginning up until the present day. And I really enjoyed that. Those poker got our foot in the door into these retailers, and they got you onboarded, which is, a long process where many suppliers back then didn't know it was going to cost them money, didn't know what the demands were, because back then when they would ask you, suppliers, do you drop ship? And everybody, yes, yeah, we drop ship. And they're thinking, yeah, we'll ship it out 2 to 3 weeks. And no, we would say like, no, it's got to go within 24 to 48 hours. We were doing that. And so we spoke e-commerce, and these people liked us. But it was poker that got us in. And so I would say probably after the 2004, I call the 2006 to 9 the lean years, because the madness of poker settled down. And most companies are defined by a product. So you would take your product maybe to brick and mortar or take it to other places. We were so tied into e-commerce, and products always came easy to us. Between my brother and I talking, we're like going, I go, products are easy. We still considered them easy. And I said, yes, these sites need to have the shelf stocked. And really, if the second I tell them that we can drop ship, that we have domestic inventory, that we can blind drop ship, put their packing slip on it, they were interested. So, and to expand to the other categories, for instance, at Target or Overstock or at Wayfair, when we would go to try and talk to a different category buyer, they didn't know we were already signed up with them, and they'd say, no, I'm not interested. And then we'd say, well, we're already a customer or a supplier to you. We're already EDI connected. They're like, oh, you are? Okay, send me everything. And so we went right down, and that's how we got into about 16 different categories. We just kept expanding product and stayed in e-commerce, and it's pretty, spread out. We still weren't building comprehensive lines at that time. We were selling anything we could get our hands on. So that's kind of how
got it.
We got to be the wholesaler and got away from poker and got to every products. And
that's what it's very fascinating for me to hear, Jim, as you talk about it. I was sort of relating back to the story that I have had in sort of building a business myself. I think the commonality that I'm seeing is that you got one niche, and it was a small use case in the grand scheme of things and how big it was going to become. But you were world-class in that, and you would not give up your fort, and you were constantly beating your own game. It was not okay to give a 2-week dropship, and you pressed on that 1 to 2 day getting product out before Prime was Prime. And that to me is like, you could have easily said, what, poker, it's fine. Like, who cares? Maybe it's 1 or 2 weeks. It's not mission critical. It could be shipped out in 1 to 2 weeks, but you really focused on making that niche to be so solid and being the world's best at it and not settling. Very similar to sort of any business that you build, and I can obviously only talk to the software business that we built. Very similar in a way that we took one niche and made sure that we were providing jaw-dropping value. There was no question about the ROI or the amount of customer value that you would generate, and become the world's best at it. And then it starts to give you the license to go big and expand beyond and all that. It's very fascinating to hear your story said it in that way.
Yeah, I give my brother Dan a lot of credit. Him and the IT guys he worked with early on in the warehouse, his experience, it was industry leading. And so I was out there with the customers bragging about it, and they were hungry for it. Now you can't really brag about it because it's expected of you, and it's all about your product again. And that's where we've had to evolve to. But in the early years, it was everything, because, and even today, a site doesn't want you to leave it to go buy something else. Even Home Depot doesn't want you to leave it to go to Amazon to buy something. They want to carry everything so they can be your internet. And that's kind of how that evolved. But yeah, like the 2006 to 2009 years is when that settled in. I was just, people are like, hey, well, what did you do after that faded out? And, the mass markets.coms really weren't in there yet. So we were still selling to all our eBay sellers, and any guy that called up and said, they saw our expanded catalog starting to expand. And they said, hey, I got a website. Can I get your products on my website? And we would say, like, sure. We'd give them the spreadsheets, the build sheets back then, and we'd help them even get it on their website. And we were so excited, like, hey, Bob has a website. Let's get it on Bob's website. So they put it on their website. You got to imagine this is 2006, 7, and 8, and the guy gets it on his website. Website looks perfect. Hey, he's calling us back. He's like, going, all right, I got it on my website, but nobody's buying. And we're like going, yeah, well, now you got to call Google. Like,
Yeah.
we can teach you how to put our products on your website, but we can't teach you how to get people to your website. And so then it dawns on us, we're like, all right, we need to supply people on websites that have traffic or know how to get it. Like, how are we going to do that? That was, because we're supplying people that are selling on Amazon at this point, and third-party sellers, and we're supplying people that are selling on eBay, and we're still selling both ourselves on there. And we've got the Target thing going, and Overstock was big for us back then. I don't want to undershoot Overstock. They were one of the pioneers. Overstock was our Amazon. We were a first-party seller on there, and so we were supplying that in the traditional sense that everyone, and we always looked out for Overstock, and so some of our small sellers were getting in their way, and that's what we had to kind of navigate through. And so really that didn't change until 2009 to 2012 is things really started to become clear what we needed to do. We were doing all the different trade shows, just saying, hey, we drop ship. I'd bring men's gifts to the hardware show. Like, and they would say, hey, your poker, your bocce sets, your things like that. Yeah, we don't need tools from you, even though we had tools. We would say, like, hey, we have our Northern Tool and Home Depot. We want to get your products on here. And once we were on there, of course, we would call their tool guy and say we're set up, and they would add the tools too. So it all worked out. But that was, we didn't know what was going to go on. And so I went to the IRCE show. I don't know if you're Internet Retail.
Yeah, Internet Retail, yeah.
Yeah, so that show in 2008 or 9 really changed my life because, we didn't know which industry we're in, because usually industries are defined by products, hardware, toys, sporting goods or textiles. But we feel e-commerce, it is a channel, but it's so nuanced that you have to think of it as an industry or you're going to fail. So, at the same time, it's a channel, but it's an industry. I mean, I had brick and mortar suppliers ask us, hey, how do we get into e-commerce? And I go, well, you see everything we got? You have to add that to your business. You can't just have your guys do both. So I went to the IRCE show, and you got to remember, it's the recession years too. And I see a booth called Woot, and they've got 6 deep waiting in there. Woot was one of the early flash sale companies out of Texas that got bought by Amazon.
You got bought by Amazon, yeah.
Yeah, and imagine places like that. I go, man, they were rock stars. I mean, you're talking about rock stars. Those guys were rock stars back then, and so we saw everything going on, business going on. I called my brother from the show. I go, what recession? I go, there's no recession here. And so you go to the conferences and they give you the book, and I called it my Bible. I got it free for going to the show. I bought a few extra copies it's the top 500 retailers book, and it was $60. I still remember how much it cost. Today, to get that same information, I think you got to pay $10,000. So what I was getting for $60 back then, I knew it was worth $10,000. So what it did for me was it said the top 500 internet retailers did 87% of all e-commerce in retail business. Specifically, the top 100 did 85% of all e-commerce business. And, the big names that weren't in the top 100, you could see them coming, and so right away I went back to our offices and I said, hey, when Bob calls and says he has a website, the eBay seller Bob, I say, if he's not in this book, you tell Bob, good luck on eBay, and you move on. And we're only putting our stuff on people that are in this book, because if we were going to supply the 15% that wasn't in this book, it was contrary to the ones that were in there. Like I said, Overstock would complain about someone, ABC Poker, selling something low, and ABC Poker might be selling one product a month, and we were getting 1 unit a month, and we were getting 10 units a day on Overstock, but they don't want to look bad because in Google searches, these small, Google didn't change its paid search algorithm at the time. They were still surfacing, and the comps were just horrible. And you got to imagine, we had hundreds and hundreds of drop shippers that were trying to sell on their own website right now. So they were just getting in the way. But that show got us on the train to all right, let's sign up as many as we can, and really showed us that these are the people that we have to get. At the same time, we were selling to the other people too, so we were kind of a little mixed up there, which we would have to solve next.
It's what's very interesting, Jim, is that you caught on to a trend which was for here to stay, and which is e-commerce. But obviously, back in 2001, nobody knew where this was going to go. This is like Wild West. I believe eBay was still collecting payments and through checks. There was no PayPal. PayPal was just starting up.
Yeah, I think we were one of the first with PayPal. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And there was so much evolution in business models. Nobody knew that for top 50 retailers are going to do 80% of total e-commerce. People thought if you launch bobspokerset.com, you could make it big. And
it did work for a couple of years, 2004, 5, and 6. If you Googled poker and the first 2 pages came up, they were people getting it from us. So it did work for a little while. But like in any industry, the big boys are coming.
But the thing was it's like any industry starting up, things change so rapidly, and until it starts to become like mainstream and it's like mature and all that. At that time, there's no way that a new incumbent can get in and start to establish themselves. At that point, the winners are winners and they're here to stay. So what's interesting is that you caught on to that when it was still a very young and new phenomena, and you latched onto it. But I got to then ask you, then what is the next decade you think? Like you've been good at sort of catching some of these trends early on. What are some successes and failures that you've seen in the last 1 or 2 years? And what do you think has to be like the next big sort of frontier that's coming up in e-commerce and retail in general?
Well, yeah, things were changing so fast. Like you said, back then, we would hire people, their skill set. There was no e-commerce experience. We were hiring people that were good at spreadsheets, that were good at analysts. They basically were adaptable. And because I never said we were geniuses or anything, I just said we were so close we could see the tea leaves, and we were adjusting as we go all the way. So we just looked smart, but we really didn't copycat anybody. We just read what the industry was bringing to us and what it needed, and then we just went for it. And like I said, those mass market accounts really came on strong, and that's where we had to cut off all the small sellers. And at that point in time, you realize that customers are finite. So we took the model of customers are finite, products are infinite. And that's kind of, for us, it was like, hey, we're going to provide an endless aisle of products. How do you do that? You be brand agnostic and you pick evergreen categories. You go and talk to the e-commerce buyers at Walmart and at Home Depot. And we would do visits because we weren't doing trade shows anymore because we're in so many categories. We'd stop in on a Monday to see the pet buyer, and the pet buyer would walk us out and say, hey, what time's your plane leave? Because that's most reps would walk in and do that. We say, oh, it doesn't leave till Thursday. We still got to talk to your hardware buyer, your textiles buyer, your outdoor buyer. We're like, oh. And so we were different, and that often made us complicated too, because on the merchandising side, they didn't see us as all one whole, but we had to make ourselves known in each category. So for us, it was expanding products. Even though when we sold to private equity, we had a couple private equity deals along the way in the next decade. They would say, hey, where's your new customer pipeline? And I said, we're not really that. We called ourselves not a poker company or a popcorn company, which we saw a lot of popcorn units now, products now. In many other categories, back then we called ourselves a supply chain solution for e-commerce mass markets, and we were still touting our logistics and stuff like that. But I think if you get about midway through the decade, Home Depot started having compliance people, and we're like, oh, we got compliance people now. Okay, that's good. I guess maybe it's not good because everybody's going to have to be as good as we are. But we saw they had a scorecard that still sticks out in my head these days, and it had 3 letter grades on it, and we got AAC. We got an A for logistics or shipping time, A for being in stock, and a C for product satisfaction. And I go like, wow. I go, the real brands, I'll say the established brands from brick and mortar, were now coming to e-commerce, and their report cards probably look like CCA. And I said, the race is on now for us to get our product level up to A, so we can all be A's, so we're tied with them. So that probably gets us to where we're at right now. We've done 7 acquisitions. We've bought some brands. We created a category management department that we're pumping out products to stock the shelves. And so that's where we're at today, where we can produce our own brands, and we're acquiring brands, and strictly being able to ship, having it in stock, being on site is no longer enough. You need the intelligence that Commerce IQ brings and everything else to compete, because you're seeing the maturity. This is still going to be the formative years in e-commerce. Someone 100 years from now is going to say, hey, 2000 to 2030 was the formative years. But this is 2.0 from what I just explained to, where you've got to have the edge. We were doing, like, flash sales was from 2010 to 2015, you could have a company doing flash sales. There was No More Rack. There was deal of the daily deals. I can't remember the names of all the different sites. Woot,
Slack deals, Slick deals, or Slack Wallet, or
So they had to make a margin on their product. We were supplying it, and we had to make a margin. Well, the mass markets didn't have the infrastructure built to where they could run deals, because they had deals teams and they had departments. I always said, flash sales went away because mass markets took that too, because mass markets would run a deal, don't need to make any money on it because they're using it for customer acquisition. A supplier, we could come in there, we really didn't have to make any money on it, because as soon as we'd run off 500 units in a day, say we broke even, we'd be on page one for the next month, because we sold a bunch of units. And the flash sales sites started to go away, because I say flash sales does not a business make. Flash sales became a channel for promotion. And that's kind of because it was a win-win for supplier and today, that's what promotions are on sites, flash sales. And so we took that into the mass market, and we would do intermittent deals, maybe like 25% on, 75% off throughout the year. So we'd have a blended margin that we could live with all year. And that ended up working great for us. And it also hurt us, because it's really hard to coordinate promotions. So you're driving down, as you know, on e-commerce, the retailers are following each other's retails. So it would drive our margins down on other sites. So really is not that sustainable of a model. We're coming out, and that's where pay-per-click and all the intelligence stuff it is really a factor now. We got our visibility through flash sales really on the sites, but now we're trying to do a more permanent solution, which is, the pay-per-click, the organic search, everything that everyone's in. That is the path for stable pricing and for visibility. I always said visibility is king, price is queen. We don't have to be the cheapest person on site, but we do have to be on page one, or at least page two. When you're on page 50, it doesn't matter if you got the lowest price. If you're on page one, you could be in the ballpark of the price. So visibility is king. How do you get it? What's another adaptable thing that we're doing is going from less flash sales and more, just that organic search that you can increase by your content and the pay-per-click and stuff. So I'm sure that's the part where you guys are at. So you guys are the future. How's that?
Well, yeah, I think it's very fascinating. I think that definitely, I completely resonate with you in that this 2000 to 2030 is kind of that years of formative years that people will look back and say, well, those are the 3 decades that really created e-commerce, and now we're just scaling. And 2000 to 2010 was kind of like just going from 0 to 1, and 10 to 20 were like, okay, well, let's figure out who's going to be alive and who's going to go away. And now we've filtered out with those companies that are going to be here for the rest of the century, if you may, for the most part. And now, like 2020 to 2030, in a way, is sort of going through that infrastructure to say, how do we operate e-commerce best in class? And one of the things which is really coming out to be highly visible and a way to move forward is automation. How do you sort of strategize with humans and like human first strategy, but machine-led execution? That's becoming very, very clear. And of course, there's still, as they say, the first phase of acceptance is denial. There's lots of brands, there's lots of people who are denying that, but that's actually the first phase of all of this. But it's really settling down. Like, it's going to be, we're going to look back on this decade and go, wow, 2020 to 2030 is what we went through with the financial sector in 90s. Well, everything was manual in 1990. Everything was machine, humming, machine to machine in 2000. And this is that decade of going from manual to manual, JBPs, lots of chaos here and there, Excel files flying around to 2030, everything's humming machine to machine and stuff like that. So at least that's my point of view in terms of like how that, but I completely resonate in terms of how the market is evolving, and like this decade is going to be sort of putting the pin to everything, saying this is how it's going to be, the world is going to be run through e-commerce.
And I know that too, because I know you're working with different retailers now, and we haven't even evolved to best practices, where the former Amazon employees are at Target, or the former Overstock employees, spread around, another industry, brick and mortar, you do a quote sheet. There's a software service that'll spit it out in all their different quote sheets. There's best practices, and some of the people just made the stuff up as they went along, which is we did, but best practices will come. I mean, it's still like, someone like Target, when we were pitching product not too long ago, they just wanted one of everything. And I said, yeah, but we hold the inventory. Why won't you, chess sets? We were saying, well, I have a $29.99 chess set. I'm like, yeah, this one's mahogany, not regular wood. And they go, no, I got it. I'm like, all right, that sounded like a brick and mortar buyer, because they're not really buying anything. So then you see in Amazon, and when AMS first started coming up, or the pay-per-click, and that was, a while ago now. And maybe 2015 or 14, I can't remember, but it dawned on us. I go, you want us to pay to make you money? You want, and so they had everything on the internet on Amazon, and so they got suppliers to compete with each other to pay for positioning. Walmart's there, Home Depot, Wayfair, all these retailers, .coms we work with, Lowe's, they're adding product, and the next thing they're doing is, hey, why don't you try our pay-per-click, And so the ones, if we're already on page 1 or 2, we're not as interested, but that's coming to all retailers because they want to be your internet. And that's why when I say customers are finite, products are infinite, they're not even customers anymore. They're platforms. They're platforms because never before in any other industry has the supplier been closer to the consumer. We have to be very conscious of that, of our ads. We're in charge of the content. We touch the product. We're the last ones to touch a product before it goes to the consumer in most cases, because we drop ship. So so that in the end, there might be 5 or 6 places that you get your stuff on the internet. So it's not growing, and that's where we want to be. But the products are the key to it for suppliers.
It's almost like every one of these websites is like a target market in itself, with like endless amount of shoppers coming in, and endless amount of categories, subcategories that you play in, endless number of strategies and tactics you could take to win. It's kind of like mind-boggling. And of course, every single year there's something new that comes up and starts to sort of move the needle on it. Earlier it was retail media, now it's DSP. Now tomorrow there's going to be something else that's going to start moving the needle. So it's very, very interesting. Now, Jim, building on that foundation of building the business so far, like you've kind of painted this rosy story, how things just work really well, one after the other. You tried a bunch of things, double down on some. I'm sure there must have been situations where you thought, oh, fuck, it's all over. I've lost it all. I've gone through it myself in my business, and we call ourselves a billion-dollar company. But there have been moments where, I remember when we were doing the pivot from selling to multi-brand retailers to selling to brands. It was at a point we felt that like we were just a hamster on a wheel, and just going past the same milestone again and again, because our customers were filing bankruptcies. We were selling to folks like Sears and others. And I did think to myself, and a lot of our folks thought to ourselves, saying, yep, it's all over, let's go home. But we did not give up, and we went back. Now, I want to hear maybe some stories, 1 or 2 stories in terms of when you got to a near-death experience, and how you, sort of what you learned out of it, how you went beyond it.
Well, we were able to make safe pivots, but so I don't know if there's any one point we were totally scared. Like I said, after the poker madness in 2006 to 9, things stabled, and poker became a category still. So that was safe for us. It didn't go away, but we thought that's all we were going to be. And we're thinking like, man, where do you go? Where do you go? Where do you go? And that's when we saw the mass markets come in, and we're like, oh, good. We got another place to sell, and we still had the edge. And when we dropped to small sellers, I think like in 2013, we weren't sure that the mass markets were going to carry us even at that point. But so what I probably didn't tell you, 2013, 2016 is when we started becoming a product building machine, because that's what this private equity firm wanted us to become. And they said, yeah, that's what we can sell. So let's do it. So we were putting out 1,500 new products a year. And I think it didn't, not what was going to sink us. It was, we had no idea what the infrastructure was going to be to support that. And as some of these products were not successful and some were, we had inventory is the total key to our business, because even when we were selling to private equity groups, they would look at us and say, like, why do you need $70 million in inventory? Why do you need 40 million? Pick a year, you know? And I'd say, like, well, you know, the retailer is the platform, and then there's the consumer, and the retailer, not like in their stores where they have 30,000 SKUs, they want 300 million SKUs. So they need people like us who are willing to carry inventory. It's why we get to play. So you had to have inventory, and so it looks like a liability to us. It really could drag you down if you have if we're not turning our inventory, have a lot of money, and our out of stock rates were dragging us down. We were out of stock, and so there was several times probably when we thought the inventory was going to get us, because it's such a huge thing that, oh my God, if this stuff doesn't sell, or in e-commerce, it's not like planning where you, like in another industry that's a 1 or 2% growth industry, you can look how many units to buy over previous year. When we bring planners in, I go, don't look at last year. I go, grab the most recent period of time. And I know you got to order in advance, but last year in e-commerce is like dog years. And that's true today too, because what sold last year, especially in 2020 when the COVID thing spiked, we were in great position for everything. Even in 2021, we were selling a lot of items, a lot of units, and this year we're not. And it's not so much the demand flattened, which it has. It's that we were probably 2 of 10 people on the page that had inventory. Now all 10 have inventory. So you can't look at last year because there's certain dynamics that didn't exist. I mean, I remember Wayfair telling us, hey, you're the only the only companies in a few years ago in the country that have patio umbrellas in stock. And I said, but now we're up to where everybody's got them in stock, and we're like going, all right, now we got to get intelligent in our marketing. So I would say inventory, and for us, we have a mantra like, if you win at inventory, you win at e-commerce from our perspective. And I'm sure, like when you're software for other companies, you're pointing out to where they're out of stock. Being out of stock in e-commerce is terrible, because you'll go from page 1 to page 20 in a hurry, and if you're out of stock too long, you won't climb right back up there. You know, we've had C SKUs become A SKUs because we had to sell what we have, and we had A SKUs become C SKUs because they were out of stock for too long. It's bridging that gap and conquering that. But that's, I'd probably say, is our biggest fear.
It's got to be because there's so much capital tied up in it, and how do you really make sure that you're sort of getting the right turns and getting the right return on the invested capital? That must be a pretty large overbearing on your mind.
It's why we get to exist, but it is an albatross at the same time.
Yeah, that's totally it. I think especially so valid in today's day and age and supply chain issues and all that. It's going to be here to stay. This thing on how do you sort of deal with supply chain issues and still be okay with sort of providing a Six Sigma output function. You take a very broken function inside getting in, which is like broken supply chain, broken inventory processes, broken lanes coming from China, broken labor markets potentially and stuff like that, but still provide a very smooth function where you're essentially driving consistent sales on your top line. That's going to be the name of the game in the next. So Jim, just a question or two to just bring us home very quick. Maybe we can keep it as a rapid fire. There's so much innovation happening in coming up with new products. I'd love to, whether you're in a large company like a Procter & Gamble or Unilever, you're trying to come up with new products every day, whether you're a small company in a garage innovating and coming up with the next Kind Bar, next Trademark Global. What's your recommendation to a aspiring exec at a large company, or somebody who's sort of coming up with new products and creating new P&Ls? If you could summarize that for us, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, Yeah, I won't go too deep on that, but it reminds me of when I went to see a Walmart buyer, and he was an outdoor buyer, and he had a glazed look because he figured he met with brick and mortar suppliers all day, and every time a brick and mortar supplier walks in, they say like, "Hey, I've got 14 new products for you. Remember those 14 last year? They're gone. We're taking those away, and I got new products for you." And he just doesn't want to teach another person e-commerce. We walk in and we say, "Hey, we have newness for you, but this old stuff, we're staying behind it because you want some permanency because it gained traction on your page and wherever they take it to Google and things like that." And so we were always looking for brand agnostic product and evergreen product so it could stay, so it wasn't trendy. And brand agnostic because we didn't have the big marketing budget to launch a brand, which is crazy. So I would say that still holds true in e-commerce. But now that we have brands and have lines, we go and look and see, hey, is there anything that can have a variant on it? Because our ASIN on Amazon or our product on Home Depot or our product on Walmart's getting looked at. Can we connect something to it? Can we create bundles because we have two products in the same system, and we can create a unique product that way? But that's kind of what we're looking at now, filling out categories in the same manner. And taking advantage of the traffic that we have.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's good. So you're saying iteration is the way to go. Like take your base and iterate out, and you'll get to the right spot.
To a point, yeah.
Yeah, great. One final question, Jim, and thanks so much for spending all this time with us. What's on the personal side of things as the world is opening up now? Is there what's left on your bucket list that you're looking to accomplish, whether it's on the personal or professional side?
Oh, I mean, I'm 56 right now, so I've kind of been trying to help myself disappear from the org chart. But I pop into many meetings, and people are still welcoming me, or at least they're telling me they're welcoming me. I would like to see this company get to the next level, and and then just fade away a little bit. And I don't know, enjoy life. I think everyone says, "Oh, you'll be bored," and I go, "Well, let me have that year off, and then I'll see what happens."
Got it. That's a great aspiration to have. Also builds a great management team for you. So, great aspiration. I wish you all the very best, and with a lot of hope that the new year and new beginnings that will come after the COVID pandemic will sort of enable that for you and your family. Well, so thank you so much, Jim. It was such fantastic to have you on the show, and always so wonderful to hear from somebody who's just grinded it, hustled your way to a multi-$100 million business. And congratulations on all your success, and thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you very much, Guru. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, it would mean so much to us if you could take a moment to share this show on LinkedIn. To learn more how Guru and his team can help optimize and grow your e-commerce business on Amazon and other retailers, visit commerceiq.ai. Thanks for listening.